Thank you all for coming to our event tonight, which, as most of you know, we are here tonight to commemorate the event occurring tomorrow, which will mark the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the Armenian Genocide. This is the day, the annual day that is used to mark and to commemorate the horrific events that have come to be known as the Armenian Genocide. We are very honored tonight to have a large number of very special guests, and I thank all of you and each of you personally for joining us. As a Holocaust Center, we recognize here that it is our mission to use the lessons of the Holocaust to help people understand other historic genocides, episodes of mass violence, and human rights violations on a massive scale. I'd like to now introduce you to the president of Queensborough Community College for a welcome, Dr. Diane Call.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Kupferberg Holocaust Resource Center, our distinguished guests, our legislators, our students. Hello, students. I'm glad you're here. I was reminiscing about 1983, which is probably before some of you were born, students, but that's when this center began. And it began with a mission of education and remembrance. And central to the mission was, of course, the Holocaust, that terrible time in our history. What we have come to do is to bring education about so many other terrible events that have occurred before and after, and regrettably, currently. So for this event, to note, to mark, to learn somehow from the lessons of history about, in this case, the Armenian Genocide, is very, very important. Our students come from all over the world, and they've experienced perhaps some isolation, perhaps some violence, and they bring to us an incredible perspective, which reminds us we can never, ever forget. I have to thank so many people, Dan Lesham, who's our director for the Holocaust Center here, and Mark Kupferberg, who is our foundation chair, and our legislators. Our legislators in New York are amazing, and the City Council and the State Assembly, David Weapon from the State Assembly, from the City Council, Paul Malone, from the City Council, Rory Landsman. They are with us every step of the way, and they believe in education. They believe in supporting our students and in the messages that our students will carry when they leave here about what it means to respect people, to think about people as individuals. Everyone matters. So I welcome you to this event, and I hope you'll come back for so many wonderful programs that are sponsored by this center. So thank you, and to our colleagues in the Armenian community who are here to share some stories with us. It's a very important lesson, and I thank you for bringing it to us.
Thank you so much. To open our commemoration event tonight, I'd like now to invite up Father Narek Tartarian from the St. Sarkis Armenian Church in Douglaston.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. I will be offering a prayer. For those who care, please rise so that we can pray together. We bow down our heads in prayer before you, God, and we thank you for your love and your grace. Hear our prayers for the intention of all victims of genocides and Holocaust. Heal the wounds of those who suffer and strengthen those who who yearn for justice. Reward abundantly those who have stood against evil in solidarity with those who suffer. On the eve of the centennial of the Armenian Genocide commemoration, and on this sacred day, where the Armenian Church canonized the 1.5 million genocide victims as saints of the Church, we beseech you, Lord, with the intercession of your new saints, to bless us and guard us. May justice and peace always prevail. Amen.
Thank you so much. I'd like now to give a chance to our elected officials to address you and share their motivations for being with us this evening. I'd like to invite up first Assemblyman David Weprin to address you.
Thank you, Dan. I really feel part of the Kupferberg Holocaust Center and Archives family, because I feel I was part of the inception. I remember when the Holocaust Center first started, and of course, you know, there was a vision to get them out of the basement, and I know Dr. Call has been very involved in that, but also her predecessor, Dr. Eduardo Marti, had a real vision, and of course it would not have happened without the Kupferberg family really coming forward and doing so much to be able to create this, this beautiful facility. And I think it's very appropriate that we have this commemoration, this recognition of the historic, tragic event which occurred 100 years ago. I guess tomorrow, I guess, is the official commemoration of the Armenian Genocide. And of course, we all know we lost 6 million Jews during, and many others, but 6 million Jews during the Holocaust in Germany and Poland over 70 years ago. And it's so important anytime a hate crime comes up. And unfortunately, there's still so much hate in our society. And I hate to say there's a lot of hate going on in Europe, but there's certainly hate right here in our backyard. And it's so important that we all come together, Queens being the most diverse county probably in the world. We have over 200 countries and religions, dialects represented right here in Queens. And anytime there's a violent act or a hate crime against one group or one individual, it's so important that we all come together and really unite against any kind of discrimination, any kind of hate. That's why it's so important that the Holocaust Center realize that, and of course events like this commemorate, and if we remember and never forget, we will not be victims of repeating history. And of course it's so important that we educate our young people, our children, our students, to events like the Armenian Genocide, to events like the Holocaust in Europe, and that way we won't be victims of repeating history. So thank you all for coming, and anything I can do and my office can do to help out, to commemorate events like this, but most importantly, to gather together anytime there's an act of hate against any group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman. I'd like now to invite up for a few remarks Councilman Paul Vallone. Please join me in welcoming.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you again. These are important events, and we want to thank Queensborough College, our Madam President, Dan. Thank you for putting this together. Both of our priests tonight, Dr. Nadig, Father Nadig and Father Abraham, thank you very much for coming. And thank you for having my son Charlie at Saturday Armenian School. If those haven't quite realized by now, I think I'm your adopted Armenian elected official. Since my wife was Miss Armenia in 1998, I'm very blessed to have an Armenian wife, and 50% of my children now are fully Armenian. So it is an honor to take my children and bring them to the exhibits and bring them every year and learn from my wife and learn from my father and my mother-in-law. And everyone, thank you for the prayers for my father-in-law, Vladimir Sardarian. He just got over double open heart surgery. And someone asked tonight, the Apelian family, who's my adopted family also, said, how is he doing? I said, how is any hard-headed Armenian male doing when a doctor tells him to stay in bed? Not a good thing, right? So he wants to get up. He wants to, exactly, the men are laughing. They know exactly that Armenian men, the last thing they want to do is stay quiet. And how do we remember? This is how we remember. We make sure our students learn from us so that this never happens again. We make sure our children hear our stories. We make sure, and I had the greatest teacher of all. For those who did not know, my father was Peter Vallone, the first Speaker of the City Council. And I'll tell you the first, thank you. When my wife, right, and he came to the wedding and he learned all about the Armenian culture and dancing and celebrating. One of the things he did as Speaker after that was to make sure that the Armenians were heard in City Council. And under his guidance, the very first proclamation in the city acknowledging that the city acknowledged the genocide so that the state and hopefully the federal government could follow suit would occur. So I'm having that done again, just so you know. So on Sunday, when we're all at Times Square at 2 o'clock and we're celebrating again the 100th anniversary, we're going to redo a brand new proclamation. And again, there was hesitation. It's amazing. It never ends. Well, this is a delicate issue and we have to make sure everyone's on board. And we didn't rest today, saying there is no, this is done. My father did it, we're doing it again. So a proclamation tomorrow morning will be drafted and brought down to Times Square on Sunday. Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at Holy Martyrs, right? We're having another event commemorating. So we continue to do that, and we share the story. And what Dad did, it was an event on Ellis Island about Armenian immigration. And the pictures there were very explicit about the Holocaust. And the Turkish government called to take them down. And Ellis Island was in the process. We were there. I haven't been many times. We have to do that more often. But we were there with my wife and I were newlyweds at the time. And she was in her Miss Armenia, and my father was getting a big kick out of it. But all of a sudden, these exactly things like this on the side were being taken down. Now, have you ever seen my father upset? That's where the Sicilian side kicks in. So he gets on the phone. He's like, I'm the freaking speaker. And he gets on the phone, and he starts calling the governor and the senators and saying, what is happening? They're taking down the exhibit. And sure enough, no one touched it. And there was few people were so upset because there was Turkish representatives there, everyone. And that my father stood up, as long as I am the speaker of this council, and we're on Ellis Island, even though it wasn't part of the city, I would tell my dad that, this will stay. And the exhibit stayed, and all of the stories of the immigrants from the Armenian community remained there for a very long time on Ellis Island. And that's part of the fights we have to do. So I learned from that. I learned from my family, and we will continue that. As my son goes to Armenian school and my daughters sing, and we continue that on, you know that we as elected officials, the Weprin family, the Vallone family, those that are here, CUNY students, education, that's the key. Our children learning not to repeat, to hear from it, that there are some uncomfortable stories in our history, and we need to learn from it. Can't cover it up. So there's something different about this year, right? At the 100th anniversary, things have been changing. The Pope, well, now we have a culture and society, we have the Kardashian family starting to do something good for once, right? And getting out there and actually putting their name behind something. And actually, you know what, my in-laws got up that day and they said, we're so proud of the Kardashians. They never said that, because they went there and they brought attention to the community, and they had a concert and they brought to the exhibits. And now all of a sudden, there's a smile on the faces. This year is a different year for the Armenian community. Everyone is talking about it. And I think that's why I thank you, Dan, and I thank the Kupferberg Center. And we must keep talking about it and take the momentum and make sure that the world never forgets. So God bless everyone. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Councilman. I also want to acknowledge that unfortunately, Councilman Rory Lansman couldn't be with us tonight, but he did send someone from his office, Massi Sarkisian, is standing in the back, and if any of you have any questions regarding Councilman Lanceman, Massis is here to represent him. So I'd like now to begin with our more formal presentations. We have two wonderful presenters tonight that I'll be introducing in due course, but let me just mention that you see all around us these amazing posters that are part of an exhibit created by the Near East Foundation. And if anyone here doesn't know about the Near East Relief effort, it's a wonderful story you're about to hear and a wonderful piece of our history you're about to learn. We also have a representative here from the Kigali Genocide Memorial Museum in Kigali, Rwanda, who is a wonderful, wonderful man that also educated a group of students I had the great fortune to take to Rwanda about 2 or 3 years ago. And they came back so powerfully moved by their experience. And that, I just came to the Kupferberg Center. For those of you who don't know, I was working in California for an organization called the USC Shoah Foundation. And the USC Shoah Foundation started in the mid-90s with a large donation from Steven Spielberg after he made the movie Schindler's List, and a mission to go out and collect survivor audiovisual testimonies from as many survivors as possible around the world of the Holocaust. Between 1994 and 1999, the foundation collected roughly 52,000 testimonies around the world in 56 countries and in 32 languages. It's an amazing accomplishment, and let me say that I'm more proud of them today than I would have been in 2000, because just this month, the Shoah Foundation launched the first 60 of the 400 Armenian testimonies that they received from Armenian filmmaker Michael Hagopian, who was an educational filmmaker who interviewed survivors starting in the 70s through the late 80s. And his film foundation, the Armenian Film Foundation, still interviewed a survivor in Los Angeles who's over 100 years old about 3 months ago. So they're still collecting every story that they can. The Shoah Foundation will be incorporating the rest of those testimonies. I'm going to show you a few of those clips. But that's only a good segue, because the Shoah Foundation also worked with the Kigali Genocide Memorial to incorporate testimonies from Rwandan genocide survivors, witnesses as well. And like I said, the Kupferberg Center sees its mission as not tied to just one historical event, in this case the Holocaust, but sees the past 40 years and really 70 years of intense research on the Holocaust as providing us today with a wonderful and powerful set of tools that we can leverage to help other communities that are victims of genocide and mass violence to understand their own experience. We now know from a lot of trial and error how to interview survivors of genocide in a way that helps them feel like they're getting to share their story with future generations, like their story matters, and learning how to listen to them and how to study their past. We can help other communities to do that. And I am most proud to be affiliated with these two organizations because they both see that as a core part of their mission. And obviously, Honoré Gatera, who's joining us from the Kigali Genocide Memorial, they also see it as their mission to help other communities and to look at their own experience not as the world is just us versus them, but the world is actually all of us versus a very small number of perpetrators and genocidaires. And I think it's important that we recognize that. So I'm going to start off by showing you a little bit of the testimonies that have been collected and how you can now watch them that are being put online and indexed by the Shoah Foundation. And 60 of them are now available in full on the web. I want to start with the testimony of Alice Shipley. She is an Armenian genocide survivor and has a very powerful, very short clip that I'm going to show you now. Hope that we can all hear it.
Right, the paper boy who sold papers right in the middle of our square was a clubfoot boy who spoke in Turkish only. he would come and shout, Ajans çok dahşatlı malhabavidislar, meaning news, news, wonderful war news. And then he would go on saying how many they had killed, how many of the enemies they had killed. And the enemy happened to be men and young boys they had taken out to dig trenches for their soldiers. And they would just spear them and throw them in the trenches. And those were the numbers that they would say how the enemy had been busted. And then the reason we found out that those men and boys were being speared and thrown into the trenches was when the young boys, 14, 15 years old, who hadn't been killed, they would dig themselves out of the trenches and come to the town holding their guts hanging out of their bellies because the spears had made holes there and the guts would be hanging out. And they would come and tell how they had annihilated all those men and boys who had been forced to dig trenches for the soldiers. But it was never trenches for the soldiers, it was their own graves.
Why is survivor testimony so important to us today? I think that you see a survivor speak, and let me just preface this by saying that before I worked at the Shoah Foundation, for 5 years, I ran a website devoted to education about Holocaust denial. Now, one of the most important things about denial, or to understand about denial, is that Holocaust denial is no different from Armenian Genocide denial, is no different from Rwandan Genocide denial. Just like every genocide has its own denial, the deniers all share the same bag of tricks. There's nothing new under the sun, they say. The techniques are the same from genocide to genocide. Now, one of the most powerful insights I had early on in working on Holocaust denial was how strongly deniers attacked survivors, more than any other group. And I thought, why in particular do they want to attack survivors? And I think even from just seeing one clip, we can all understand intuitively why it's so important to them to attack the words of survivors. Because you see something like that, and it doesn't matter how many facts or figures or reports a denier places in front of you, you know it's not true. Because a survivor who has no reason to share the most horrific experience they've had in their life, and every reason not to share it, who would want to talk to others, to unknown others, in front of a video camera, to people and share your most intimate moments of horror, trauma, and shame? It's almost unimaginable. And as I was writing my dissertation on Holocaust survivor testimony, and it was taking me forever, and I just couldn't focus every day. You can't wake up every day and think about this stuff. I had a very smart advisor who turned to me and said, your problem is that you're thinking about survivors as sufferers. He said, think about survivors and their stories that they're giving to you. Think about that as a gift. And for a while I thought, what kind of a gift could this possibly be? And I thought about my own work. And does the world need another person to write about genocide? What will be the best cases that someone reads about this and gets horribly depressed? What's the point of that? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized what kind of a gift this is. Survivors are telling us several things. One, this is what mankind is capable of doing to other human beings. And that is a crucial message for us all. Number two, this is what those actions do to a human being. I am the survivor of that action, and I'm telling you what it did to me. That's a second kind of gift about what it means to be human. And third, it gives us an opportunity to be ethical humans, because we now have the chance to, first of all, inoculate ourselves, hopefully, against one day becoming genocidaires, which I think is a capability ingrained in all of us as history attests. And two, it teaches us how we ourselves can become advocates for the survivors and for the victims who never made it to the other side to share their stories with us. And that's what I think we all are. Everyone here who has seen this testimony, you are now an advocate for that story. I just wanted to give you a little bit of history. The Armenian Film Foundation, as I mentioned, started in 1979 by Michael Hagopian, who had made educational films. So he had hundreds of short interviews with people on particular topics. He realized by 1979, as survivors were dying, that he had a very unique collection in his outtakes, and that those collections themselves needed to be preserved. And to this day, his collection is the largest collection of Armenian survivors speaking on film. There are video collections, there are audio tape collections. This is the largest on film. This is on the page of the Shoah Foundation. I can share the link with you. Every day this month for 30 days, they're putting up another clip of testimony. The clip I just showed you was day 11, and the clip I'm going to show you later is day 12. You can visit this site and see it. There's another site that I can give you the link to where you can actually search all 60 testimonies that they have, and you can put in a town name, you can put in a kind of experience, you can put in a famous person's name, and see where, and jump right to the minute where that is discussed in one of these testimonies. It's an amazing resource, and it's free on the internet today, and all of you can see it. They've put up 60 of 400, as I mentioned, so over the next couple years as their fundraising advances. I've already mentioned all this. They have not only testimonies of survivors, but some very unique historical witnesses. This interview was conducted with the grandson of Henry Morgenthau I, who was the US ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, who has become very well known to history for writing several postcards to the State Department, alerting them to the fact that massacres were coming and begging for help. And Honoré, when we speak with you, the other thing that's important to notice, and he actually brings up the Holocaust himself, that the connections in these genocides extends beyond the superficial details to even the fact that in all of these cases, there were people shouting warning and people around the world who ignored them.
Yes, I was very close to my grandfather. I bear his name, and I remember his feelings about what happened in the tragic years of 1915, I think very vividly, because I think in many ways this was the most memorable moment of his life, those tragic events. I think perhaps as a Jew who was born in Bismarck's Germany, now well over a century, that he perhaps had a very special sensitivity to what was going on in Turkey at a time when it was really closed off from the rest of the world. As is well known, at this moment in Turkey in 1915, the Allies had been defeated. The British had failed in the storming of the Dardanelles, and the alliance between Turkey and Germany was very strong and powerful, and they had succeeded in cutting off the Allies, the British and the French particularly, who had been close to the Armenian people, so that at that point the Turks felt that they had an absolutely free hand in the destruction of a people. And perhaps it would be...
there's a lot of material, and I encourage you all to go visit it. But for the sake of keeping our event tonight on schedule and short, it's now my pleasure to introduce you to our next speaker. And I'm happy to share more of this material with any of you. We are currently working here at the Kupferberg Center to bring the whole collection from the USC Shoah Foundation here, so it can be accessed from any computer in the center, or really, once it's here, any computer within the CUNY system would have access to all 54,000 genocide testimonies and growing that the Shoah Foundation has. So 60 are already there for anyone, and that's quite a powerful monument all on its own. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Honoré Gatera, who has spent the last 5 years as the manager-director of the Kigali Genocide Memorial, and before that spent about 7 years as the lead guide. Since 2004, He's going to share some of his experiences addressing the themes of how do we remember. Please join me in welcoming him.
A very good evening, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be here 21 years after genocide that could take my life. As the introduction was given, I'm a genocide survivor from Rwanda, and that's in 1994. Maybe in this room, there are people who were born after that moment. So if the genocide had taken my life, you wouldn't have seen me here speaking today. And the main reason why I can stand and talk is because I was given a chance in life to be a messenger of peace, a messenger of prevention. This month, April, in Rwanda, is meant or was meant to be a month of milk. Milk in my country means happiness, means families are all together and happy. But from 21 years ago, that month has changed to a month of blood. 21st of April, I was traveling to the US, coming to attend this series of events. Just a day before, it's my birthday. A birthday that I never celebrated for the last 21 years because it doesn't anymore have a meaning for me, because I believe that my life is not valuable than more than 1 million people who died in my country. I've made the decision of changing it in a way that it even went into my official documents. My passport means I was born on the 7th of December, but for sure I was born on 20th of April. It's not because that date hurts me a lot, but it's because I wanted to give a value to my family, to Rwandans, to all the victims of genocide that humanity has gone through. 11 years ago, I started a career that I didn't know that was really going to be important, or that is going to be teaching people around the world, when I joined the team that was creating the National Memorial, the Kigali Genocide Memorial. When I joined, I was still at university in the last year, and I was feeling that I have energy and I'm going to volunteer for a place that is now a final resting of more than 259,000 bodies. But in the end, it became a passion and it became part of my life. As I go around the world, I try to make sure that I give a chance to the younger generations to know what happened and to know what can happen to anyone. As we commemorate and remember in April, this week we are commemorating and remembering more than 1.5 million of Armenians who died in the Ottoman Empire, as we are doing so in Rwanda for more than 1 million Tutsi that died during the same month for 100 days. So April has meant a lot to me, and it's recently 6 years ago that I discovered most of the killings that have happened, genocide killings, started in April. And that marked my mind a lot. It was after I had decided to change my birthday, but it gave it a stronger meaning as I got to know that. Now, as we stand here, 100 years after, we are remembering atrocities that were committed by human beings like us. And watching these testimonies gave me a sense of what we are doing today, because if we didn't have these clips, in the next 100 years, those who deny the genocide will be able and will have a way to deny that it didn't happen. 21 years after the genocide in Rwanda, a few of the survivors are able to talk about their own stories. In some cases because it's still hurting, because their hearts are really broken, or in other cases because they haven't got to the point of understanding the meaning of giving a testimony and the legacy that you are leaving behind when you give a testimony. It's not a campaign that we are doing to get the testimonies, but we are doing it for the younger Rwandans, for the entire humanity, for people among this audience, or for people who live here in America that didn't know the genocide happened in Rwanda. Because even in a tiny country that is in the middle of the African continent, I'm sure it would be very difficult for people to locate it. And giving those testimonies, it's a legacy that will help the humanity younger generations. In Rwanda, we've opted a way of remembering the genocide for education. I need to share with you an experience I learned from people that I met in this career, and those are from Liberia. In Liberia, they had a conflict that took thousands and thousands of people, villages wiping villages. And they've gone now into a process of rebuilding the country. A country that is promising, as you see it now, but a country that is really broken and that is at a danger for me, a danger of a genocide. I met a group of Liberians who asked me a question that I've been asked more than 100 times in my career. Why do you remember these atrocities? Don't you think you are contributing to hatred, to reminding people that they lost their families and hate those who killed them? Then I asked them, do you have in your country a peace or reconciliation process that you are doing? The answer was yes. Why do you do it? They told me, we've decided to forget and move on. Then my next question was, can I ask a question in one of you? The man I pointed out asked him, have you forgotten what happened to your family? Have you forgotten that your right hand arm that you don't have is because of the atrocities that happened in your country? He didn't reply to me, but he started crying. That meant a lot to me, because in the end he ended up by saying, yes, I didn't forget it, and it's still hurting me, and I'm angry against those who did it. But you told me that you have forgotten and you are building a new nation. Remembrance, commemoration, education that is based to the commemoration and remembrance is key to rebuilding nations, to rebuilding societies, and to rebuilding or building the unity and reconciliation processes among people who killed each other. Because in my country, people who speak the same language, people who live the same life, people who had the same culture and tradition, killed their neighbors and their friends. And that's the reason why I give a value to commemoration, to remembrance, because that's the key to the processes of peace that we are building in the future. As we keep remembering the atrocities, we are educating the future generations. I will tell you that it's only when I was 16 years old that I knew the Holocaust. In my primary education, I didn't learn anything about the Holocaust. When I reached my 4th year of high school, that was in 1998, after the atrocities that happened in Rwanda, a genocide that we didn't even know how to call it in our mother tongue, time before the UN had approved it as a genocide, my teacher was teaching me about World War II. from the beginning, the late 20s to the 40s. And in all his lectures, he never said the word Holocaust. I had a chance to read the book in the library because by that time there was no internet in my country. And I found the word Holocaust. The next morning in our history class, I asked him, "You've taught us about World War II. I've memorized more than 200 dates of the events that happened with the Allies and Russia and other countries, but you've never told us about this." It was a challenge for him, because in Rwanda, it was just 3 years after the genocide. And in a class, he was teaching children of survivors, children of perpetrators, children who come from the different backgrounds. The way he taught me about the Holocaust was to meet me after class and tell me about it, and even start comparing to what happened in Rwanda. So I got to know that genocide has happened before in history, and let alone I knew about the case of Armenia. I knew about the case of the Herero and Nama of Namibia. And I started reflecting about how did this happen before in history, as Cambodia as well. I skipped it. And it did happen in Rwanda. Those are questions that didn't have an answer by that time. But personally, I managed to answer those questions across the last 11 years that I'm involved in this career. So as we talk about all this background, I want to come back to education, because in my education, I didn't have a chance to learn about how we can prevent genocide and mass atrocities. Our memorial center in Kigali is teaching young Rwandans, is teaching anyone who comes to see our country of 1,000 hills. And particularly in the country, now our program has been accepted to be part of the national curriculum of history lessons in Rwanda, a course that we never learned. People of my generation have never learned about the history of Rwanda, because the history books that existed were transformed in favor of those who were planning the genocide. After the genocide, the government decided to stop it. Now, we are giving a chance to young Rwandans as a memorial to learn about their background, to learn about history, to learn about genocide and how they can prevent it. Because before, the classes, the teachers, the schools were not able to develop any program that would teach about the genocide, because they were seeing children of perpetrators, children of survivors sitting in front of them, and there was no way to break the silence of talking about it. But as a memorial, we developed a participatory method that is now helping young Rwandans to talk about their backgrounds, their families, their parents, and how they are committed to build the future. The importance of testimonies in all these courses, as Dan has been talking about it. Africa is known as a continent where the oral tradition is very important. People transmit things to their children, to their grandchildren, by talking and not writing. And testimonies are giving a chance to people who don't have a great culture of reading and writing by talking and keeping the audiovisual materials of their knowledge, of their experience, of what they went through. And this is fulfilling the objective of all of us who are committed to fight genocide and all those who deny it, because now the genocide denial is the ultimate step of the genocide. All these voices, all these thousands of testimonies that are being collected, in the next 100 years will be the fact that the genocide happened, and different efforts have failed, were in the eyes of millions of people who were dying, because Rwanda has seen the UN and other Western superpowers failing to protect people who are in danger of a genocide. So I'm pleased to be here. If we have an occasion for questions and answers, I can share much more of our work and how important it is. I will be able also to share things online because, as Dan mentioned, the platform where you can see testimonies and search in the testimonies, we have the same platform in Rwanda that is accessible worldwide on internet. So thank you very much for giving me this privilege. I'm always honored to talk to people around the world. As I said, it's a second chance that I was given in life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honoré. It's always a privilege to get to hear you speak. It's now my pleasure to invite up Molly Sullivan, who is the director and curator of the Near East Relief Historical Society, an educational initiative of the Near East Foundation. Molly joined the foundation in order to preserve the incredible history of the NEF's precursor organization, the Near East Relief. She will tell you about their work, about the exhibit you see before you, and about the digital version that's set to launch tomorrow. So please join me in welcoming Molly Sullivan.
Can you hear me? Okay. It's an honor to be here. I can't even express what a privilege it is. Thank you. To stand before you and to talk about a subject that has become so important to me in a very short period of time. Time and memory, those are huge concepts. And on the way here, I was thinking, I often find that I think in metaphors and similes. It's simultaneously one of my favorite things about myself and one of my least favorite things about myself. But I was thinking history is like a telescope. Studying history is like looking through a telescope. You can look at the sky as a whole through a telescope. You can look at a single star through a telescope. History is the same way. We can look at history writ large, massive concepts. We can look at tiny pinpoint dates, times, people, names, and stories. We also have the benefit when we're looking at history of hindsight. We can form our own opinions about what we would have done in different positions, how we might have handled things differently if something were to happen to us. But basically, if history itself is a telescope, then I would argue that genocide is a very specific type of lens. It's a lens that shows us the worst in people. It shows us the horrible things that humans can do to other humans. But if you flip it, it shows us the best in people as well. It shows us the amazingly heroic acts that everyday individuals can commit. Small acts that save one life, large acts that save many lives. And I know that people don't like doing show of hands things, but I'm very curious. How many of you had heard of the Armenian Genocide before you heard about this event? Okay, that's actually very good. And how many of you had heard of an organization called Near East Relief before this event? Aha.
Could you give us the countries that you consider the Near East? Because that might be a different definition for many of us.
Sure. Well, the organization that I represent is the Near East Foundation, and we've been in existence since 1915. We were founded as a committee in direct response to the Armenian Genocide. At the time, the term Near East was the more popular term. Middle East was not a term that was really in common parlance at the time. And Near East was a geographic area incorporating much of what was then the Ottoman Empire and what we would now call the Middle East. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. Some of those countries actually were not in existence yet at the time when our story as an organization begins. As part of the Near East Foundation, my job within the foundation is fairly specific. We are an educational initiative within a larger international humanitarian organization. Near East Foundation is active in 8 countries around, throughout North Africa and the Middle East at this time. But when it was founded in 1915, it was in direct response to the Armenian Genocide. And part of my specific job is to attend events like this, produce the exhibition that you see around you, which I hope you'll have a chance to look at. It will go into much more detail than I am able to go into in a very short period of time. And also to offer a shameless plug of our digital museum, which debuts tomorrow, neareastmuseum.com. So basically, if I can give you an extremely brief history of the events that led to the formation of Near East Relief. In 1915, Ambassador Morgenthau, who represented the US in the Ottoman Empire, drafted a telegram that would become extremely historic, but at the time, it didn't receive very much attention. That telegram referred to a campaign of race extermination that was in progress in the Ottoman Empire against its Armenian residents. And specifically, the ambassador asked for assistance in order to help people to emigrate. He wanted to help people, Armenians, to leave an area where they were in great danger. And he had appealed to the State Department specifically, did not receive a response, wrote a second telegram saying, "Did you get my first telegram? I wrote you a telegram, it was important." Did not receive a response. Finally, in his third telegram, in September of 1915, he referred to some specific individuals that he knew. These were philanthropists, educators, people who had a history of working in different countries in the Near East and were involved in the area, had knowledge of the area. And basically in his telegram, he was saying, "It sounds like I'm not really getting anywhere with the State Department, but could you at least pass this message along to a few people that I think will do something with it?" And they did. James L. Barton, Cleveland H. Dodge, and a group of interested American philanthropists formed an organization which at the time was strictly setting out to raise $100,000. If that sounds like a lot of money now, imagine how much it was worth 100 years ago. They gathered in an office in Manhattan and they laid out a plan to raise that money by approaching basically everyone they knew, individuals, businesses, and they did it. They sent that money to Ambassador Morgenthau, who was able to dispense it throughout the region and was able to help set up relief stations for refugees, for Armenians who had escaped from deportation and massacre, and who were surviving against incredible odds, astronomical odds. These are people who had been deported from their homes at a moment's notice, sent into a desert with the intention that they would die there because there was no food, there was no water, there was no access to medical care, and there were no resources. One of the things that's very important to remember about all genocide is that each genocide is different. Each genocide is unique. At the same time, each genocide is the same because every genocide, wherever it happens, whenever it happens, is born of hatred, born of profound hatred. And genocide doesn't just tear apart countries or communities or towns or families. It tears apart individuals. It tears apart the very fabric of a person. And in the case of the Armenian Genocide, as with many genocides, many of the survivors were children. I want to show you a very brief video about one of the orphanages that Near East Relief operated to care for some of the youngest survivors of the Armenian Genocide. ignore the bit at the end about the Kickstarter campaign. This is something that was created back in December when we were in the process of funding the online museum. But the reason I show you this video is, again, to show you that tragic events can, in fact, bring out wonderful qualities in people, in individuals. And one of the very important things to remember is that oftentimes people view genocide as something that is committed by an unknown massive entity, and view genocide victims or genocide survivors, again, as an unknown, unnamed entity. One of the things we're striving to do, one of the things that any organization like this is striving to do, is to recognize these people as humans, as individuals with lives and stories and memories and a sense of humanity. We want to give that back. And also, just in terms of the idea of witnessing, of speaking out, I always like to share a little bit about Nellie Miller, the young woman in that video, because in some ways she was incredibly unique. She chose at the age of 26 to drop everything in her life and travel to a place that she had only ever heard of, to work with people she didn't know, to care for other people's children, and to take on what would become the greatest adventure of her life. At the same time, she was not particularly unique. She was a young woman who loved her family, who loved the young children in her family, who was active in her community, and who cared. She was passionate and committed about helping other people. And I always like to add that the women of Near East Relief hold a very special place in my heart, because many of them left to go work in this country on the other side of the world. And they performed these incredible jobs where they were the directors of hospitals, they were the directors of orphanages, and these were women who couldn't even vote in the country that they came from. One of the ways that we remember is by looking at firsthand material. It seems like the more technology changes, the more we value the original item. We value authenticity because it's really lacking in our life. We look at everything on a screen. You're looking at something on a screen right now. But if you travel to an archive center like this one, if you look at a first edition of a book in a library, if you look at photographic images, that is witnessing. You are bearing witness because someone else had the courage to bear witness at the time. But archival preservation and the preservation of memory through the authentic item is not without its challenges, as you can see in these pages from a Near East Relief scrapbook that is in our archival collection. I love going to our archives and looking through this. At the same time, it's full of water damage. It's acidic paper, so actually the materials are glued to paper that is eating away at the documents every single minute of the day. We also have issues with non-archival paste. Who would know that paste could turn into a destructive force that destroys documents? Well, it can. And lastly, where and when is each document from? That is a question that plagues anyone doing research, because as much as we crave authenticity, sometimes it can be very difficult to determine if something is actually authentic. Fortunately, the documents in our archival collection are documents that we as an institution have been saving for nearly 100 years. So we have a fairly good idea of where they came from, how they got into our collection. But in order to remember in the modern world, we have to take on a new task, digital memory. So tomorrow, when we launch our online museum, you'll see that we have changed some of our images slightly, changed the color, sharpened the focus, to give people an opportunity to see photographs and documents that they never would have seen before. And this is astonishing. This is an incredible tool to be able to put information out into the world digitally. These are just a few glimpses of still shots of what the digital museum is going to look like. More than 1,000 people volunteered to work with Near East Relief in order to provide humanitarian aid in the wake of the Armenian Genocide. And we want to honor each and every one of those people in order to call attention to the fact that ordinary people, as if there is such a thing as an ordinary person, but that every person can do something. Every person can accomplish great acts. You'll also be able to search our online archive, find images, find places, and look up as much information as we are able to provide on the different orphanages and different relief centers. We want to share this story because this is such a special American story. It's a story of how the American people joined together in response really to a single telegram that was a call to action, to pay attention to something going on the other side of the world, at a time when information traveled so slowly that every moment really counted in a response. Over the course of 15 years, Near East Relief accomplished a tremendous amount of work with the help of the American people, raising more than $110 million, and that's in 1915 dollars, feeding more than 12 million people, providing medical care to 6 million, caring for and educating more than 135,000 people, children. And these children comprise essentially a generation of Armenian culture. And Near East Foundation continues our work today. We're in 8 countries. We are constantly building peace through economic cooperation, empowering women through micro-enterprise, and we have a very excellent website on our current projects. And just in closing, you've heard tonight that sharing testimony is a gift, and I really can't emphasize that enough. Just as genocide is born of hatred, memory can be born of pain. But memory in the form of testimony is a gift that is born of as much love as it is born of pain. And we are approaching the time when there are going to be no more survivors of the Armenian Genocide. And when they are no longer able to remember, who will have that responsibility? Each and every one of us in this room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Molly. Honoré, please come join me. I just wanted to let you know, Molly, no one is getting up and leaving because of your presentation. We had a lot of students with us tonight, and their class period just ended. And so what that means is that it's a great opportunity for us to all, everyone who's standing, please come filter in and grab seats. There are now a lot of seats. We can have a more intimate continuation to our evening. I'm glad you all were able to stay for the main presentations. Thank you all so much for coming. We have now some time for some questions for our speakers. I will serve as moderator, and please wait when you want to ask a question. Marissa is coming around with the microphone. Thank you so much. If you're a student who's leaving, please leave quietly and undisruptively as possible. And everyone else, please feel free to filter up, as I mentioned. So, question. Sandy, did you have one?
I do.
Wait for the mic, please.
Here you go. I do. Actually, it's a question that could be answered by both the speakers. I listened very hard, and I'm schooled more in Holocaust studies than I am maybe in the genocide you referred to. And I also have learned a lot tonight. But in all of the talks, I didn't hear one word that talked about political considerations. Hatred is got to be born by somebody igniting it. There are instances, I'm sure, that we could suggest from the 1920s in Europe. But can you think of political considerations that fostered the genocides of which you spoke?
Well, I think I would be the first one to talk about that, because as we all know, whenever genocide happens and wherever genocide happens, is planned by the regime. And politics are always accompanying any plan that is being made to plan and execute the genocide. For the case of Rwanda, it was totally politics, because from the time of independence in the early 60s, Rwanda was not really getting independence, but Rwanda was handed to a handful of people who were educated by the colonizers about how they have to hate one part of the population. And the political teaching, the whole political arena in Rwanda for the next 40 years, almost 40 years, was the same ideology. I'll give you an example. In Rwanda, we had what it's called the Hutu 10 Commandments, referred to the 10 Commandments of God. It's a document that was made in 1959 when that group of people started the revolution against the Tutsi. In 1992, that was 33 years later, the same document was produced or reproduced. And the last commandment was saying that the social evolution, the independence, and the referendum of 1962 are a very good reminder of the origins of our ideology, and that should guide everyone among us, meaning the Hutu. So the politics that has been happening in Rwanda were reminded to everyone on a daily basis that the Tutsi is an enemy everywhere. And then when you go to talking about, for example, the failure of the international community into protecting people in Rwanda, the politics come in because Rwanda was not known before that period. And most particularly, as we look at the early 90s, many countries, including the United States of America, were focusing on the Gulf War and then also the Balkans, but most importantly, the events of the Black Hawk War in Somalia. And Rwanda was not attracting any attention politically of different superpowers that could intervene. So for me, personally, and even the belief that we have as an organization, politics are behind all the plans and activities of planning and executing a genocide.
I have very little to add to that. That was a remarkable answer. In the case of the Armenian Genocide, it was clearly a political operation. It was a genocide that was orchestrated by the government of the Ottoman Empire against its own people, against people living in the Ottoman Empire who happened to be of a different religious background. And I would agree in saying that genocide is not something that arises out of nowhere and happens quickly. History happens at a very slow rate. And in the case of the Armenian Genocide, there were massacres over several hundred years, with the most severe massacres in the late 1800s and early 1900s, leading up to the events of 1915. And really, I mean, politics played a role in each and every chapter of that history.
Thank you so much. Are there other questions? Please.
Thank you both for tonight. You've really helped me understand a lot and where you're coming from. Ms. Sullivan, I'm so happy to hear that you're representing an organization that has been so in tune with over this 100 years of I'm Armenian, of our history. And I wish I had known more about this earlier in my life. It would have been very helpful for myself and my friends. And your testimony, Mr. Katera, reinforced this whole thing that both our cultures have gone through. Now, we're here today after 100 years because we're still saying, let's not forget, let's remember. And there are the society, still not the Ottoman society, but the Turkish government that wants to forget it. And that's why we hold this commemoration at Times Square in April, to say we are not going to forget. And that's why we're petitioning congressmen and politicians to say this has to be something that has to be enacted in our government. Some of the countries have already, like France, but the United States still has not committed itself to this. And it's always a political reason. But that's why we're still here 100 years, and we're still saying we're not going to forget. And one more thing. I think the word survivor just speaks for itself. All these people that you're interviewing, they have nothing else to say other than that they're there and they have survived. And because they survived, they showed us that strength. My father, who was orphaned at 4, who lost his parents by the Turks, who had a baby, his infant brother die in his arms, survived, came to this country, did very well here, supported his family, and I've grown from everything that he was able to give me. So these survivors don't have to say anything, they just are.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments for our speakers? All right, let me just take the opportunity. I had a few questions for the panel myself. I appreciate the comments, and of course this is a commemoration event. So we talk about the genocides that we're commemorating. But I've had conversations, and I want to pick up on some of the themes that emerged tonight, just to ask along the lines of the question of, does memory create more strife? I think that one of the things I'm wondering is, how do we remember the genocides we're trying to remember in such a way that the result is going to be more peace? You started off your comments by saying, I'm a representative for peace, I work for peace. And I guess, what's your sense of how we can teach genocide and end up at the end with peace?
I would say that one of the aspects of the Armenian Genocide that lends itself to an educational framework perhaps more easily than more modern genocides is the fact that while sadly we are losing the survivor community, that is creating some distance in the educational community. And perhaps people are more comfortable teaching about the genocide now because they feel they can be a bit more objective given the passage of time, which of course has a flip side. We are losing the valuable firsthand experience of survivor testimony. But I think that in order to create peace, we have to examine not just any one genocide in a vacuum. I think that we have to examine genocide as a whole and examine the actions of governments and societies against people in order to find commonality between these different events that have occurred throughout history.
Well, in reference to Rwanda, I think the perspectives are very different because the genocide happened 21 years ago. And we, as I mentioned before, we are a society that is made up of perpetrators, survivors, and returnees who were refugees for more than 30 years. So everyone has suffered in one way or another, and most particularly when we go to the perpetrators of the genocide and study their psychology, a big number of them is also suffering of trauma of what they have seen and of what they have done, because our successful process of unity and reconciliation in Rwanda has clearly shown it wherever we had testimonies of survivors. By the way, in Rwanda, as we collect the survivors' testimonies, we are also trying to collect perpetrators' testimonies for those who accept to talk about what they have done. Because that, as an educational resource, will be very important in the future to learn from and see the reason why a human being can get involved in a bloodshed of killing 100 people a day. So commemoration, remembrance, preserving memory as a key to education and not deepening hatred is very important, because in Rwanda we've learned how the education system struggled a lot to have a way of teaching those young children from various families that have different backgrounds. And we found out that the way of tackling it is talking about it. I compare it as if you are wounded and you go to the hospital. It hurts a lot. But after 1 week, you are cured and you can start walking, or you can start to use the part of your body that was wounded. It's the same process, but in years, because at the hospital you can spend a week. But this will take, I'm not sure, 20 years or 30 years. But we are doing it for the future generations. There is a proverb that we have in Kinyarwanda, or mother tongue, that I don't know how to translate in English, but it means that a tree can be strengthened when it's still young. When it's grown up, it's no more possible. So we believe, and this belief has guided everyone, that our parents and maybe ourselves will not change. The feelings we have are very difficult to change. But what about the next 20 years, when my son will be almost 20, or will be 15, or will be 30? That's where we found out how important it is to keep the memory of genocide and touch on any side, even the deeper one that hurts some of us. Because as survivors in Rwanda, I would honestly say that we went through the painful moment of listening to perpetrators talking about the death and the torture they killed our families in. But as time goes on, we now start to understand how important it is for the future generations, because as we commemorate, as we remember, the future generations will have a base to learn what happened in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful answer. I think that at this point, we're going to have to hold further questions. Please feel free to come up to our speakers after the event is closed. We do want to let our speakers and our attendees wrap the event on time. I would like at this point to welcome up Father Abraham Malkasian of the Armenian Church of the Holy Martyrs right down the street for concluding remarks.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank you to all the organizers on behalf of all the Armenians around the world. And actually, I am from Armenia. I was born in Yerevan, the capital city of the Republic of Armenia. Some scholars, in describing the mechanics of the genocide, resist the conclusion that it was a form of religious persecution of Christian Armenians. Perhaps there is a sociological point to be made here about the specific motivation of the Ottoman government at that moment in time. But the larger reality is that the Armenians' unwillingness to part from their unique Christian identity had been a fact of life for centuries. At any point during the generations preceding 1915, our ancestors could have renounced their faith, converted to Islam, and made their lives infinitely easier. But they didn't. They preserved the legacy of their ancient Christian heritage in the full knowledge that to do so made them vulnerable in a frequently hostile society. That desire to preserve and honor their faith and national background was in its way the first step on the road to martyrdom. It laid the foundation for the crown of sainthood. In the deepest sense, it is immaterial to dwell on the intentions of the tormentors, whether the Turks were motivated by religious hatred or some political ideology. From the perspective of those who died, they did so knowingly, in the name of refusing to let go of their Christian faith and national heritage and background. And maybe some of you already heard about the canonization. Just today, all our victims of the Armenian Genocide, 1.5 million Armenians, were canonized, were proclaimed as the new saints of the Armenian Church, of our mother church. And I would like to conclude with special prayer dedicated to the newly canonized saints, holy martyrs of the Armenian Church. Please rise. Հանուն Հոր եւ Որդվո եւ Հոգվին Սրբո, Amen. Christ our God, you crown your saints with triumph, and you do the will of all who fear you, looking after your creatures with love and kindness. Hear us from your holy and heavenly realm by the intercession of the Holy Mother of God and by the prayers of all your saints, especially the holy martyrs who gave their lives during the Armenian Genocide, the first genocide of the 20th century, for faith and for the homeland whom we commemorate today. Hear us, Lord, and show us your mercy. Forgive, cancel, and pardon our sins. Make us worthy thankfully to glorify you with the Father and with the Holy Spirit, now and always, and unto ages of ages. Amen. Thank you.
With that, we conclude our presentation and our commemoration event this evening. I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope that you will join us again for other events in the future. Thank you so much for coming.